In the center of Berlin, children play innocently over what was once Adolf Hitler's death tomb. It was here, in his bunker, on the 30th of April 1945, that Hitler prepared himself for suicide. Outside, in a devastating final assault on the heart of the Third Reich, the Russian army closed in on the Führer.
I stood next to the machinery room when I heard a shot. Then everything happened very quickly. I ran away out of fear, but I immediately came back down from the upper bunker. Just then, they were wrapping Hitler in blankets.
Hitler's death brought to an end his dream of a 1,000-year Reich. It lasted only 12 years, but changed the world. The Führer was defeated by the Allies, including a man once his partner, then his nemesis, a man who shared many of the same characteristics, Joseph Stalin. Stalin was to continue his rule for 8 more years until March the 5th, 1953, when he died of a brain hemorrhage. Different endings to lives that were remarkably similar. Deprived childhoods, violent fathers, adoring mothers, problems with women, and paranoia. They were both mass murderers. Hitler was responsible for millions of deaths in the Holocaust, 6 million Jews, and hundreds of thousands of gypsies and homosexuals.
Hitler was very compulsive, phobic, and paranoid, both in considering himself to be the object of persecution and attempts to kill him, and in the positive sense of believing that he had a sacred mission to save Germany and save the world.
Stalin murdered more than 20 million of his own people, political opponents and innocent victims whom he considered a threat.
In an ordinary context, I think he would be judged mentally ill. I think he would be judged paranoid, although I don't think he suffered from a full-blown paranoid schizophrenia.
How do you measure and explain such monstrous evil? One approach is a controversial new field of research, psychohistory.
I used all fields of social science that I could pull something from. Psychoanalysis, behaviorism, experimental psychology in general, social psychology, anthropology, sociology.
Hitler is often described as an enigma, and he is an enigma in many ways. There's a school of thought that argues Hitler was so evil we can never really understand him. But that's not the psychohistorian's point of view. We think that by the use of scientific psychology, we can plumb the depths and grasp his deeper meanings, his significance.
By examining their lives, as far back as childhood, startling similarities become clear. Born in the Georgian village of Gori on December the 21st, 1879, Stalin was christened Joseph Jugashvili. 3 siblings had died before his birth. His deeply religious mother nicknamed him Sozo and promised to dedicate his life to God. Joseph's father was an abusive alcoholic who savagely beat his son, one time so severely that the boy had blood in his urine.
His father was a drunken shoemaker who beat his mother, and Stalin got beaten up as a little child by trying to defend his mother. This had a lasting impression on him.
Ever since childhood, he felt unworthy. As a result of these early childhood experiences, he had a low self-esteem, what's typically called inferiority complex.
Joseph's physical characteristics didn't help. He never grew taller than 5 feet 4 inches, and his face was scarred from smallpox. His body was slightly deformed, the left arm shorter than the right and rigid from a childhood accident. Hitler was also unhappy with his looks. A colleague noted his low, retreating forehead, ugly nose, broad cheekbones, small eyes. Hitler didn't like his plump nose, which he considered Jewish. Both Hitler and Stalin suffered from inferiority complexes. Even as a boy, Joseph was quick to lose his temper and harbored grudges. Joseph's mother, Yekaterina, sent him to the church choir, hoping he might become a priest. In 1894, at the age of 15, Joseph entered the theological seminary in Tbilisi, embarking on a life of rigid routine. Joseph's intelligence, prodigious memory, and talent for details impressed his teachers, but they also witnessed a stubborn, violent side to his nature. Finding the seminary life oppressive, Joseph turned away from religion and became attracted to anarchism, revolutionary terrorism, and Marxism. After 5 years in the seminary, he was expelled for his revolutionary activities.
He might be described as a warfare personality. His whole life consisted in struggle against those whom he put down in his mind as enemies. He had what we might call an enemy complex.
Ten years after Joseph's birth, on April the 20th, 1889, Adolf was born in Braunau, a small desolate town in Austria. His mother, Clara, was married to a moderately successful civil servant, Alois Schicklgruber, 23 years her senior. She was 18 years old when she gave birth to Adolf. Alois Schicklgruber, who later changed his name to Hitler, was a rigid, cold, strict disciplinarian who regularly beat his son. When he was 10, Hitler decided to run away from home to escape the violence. His father caught him and gave him such a beating that he was in a coma for days, his life hanging by a thread.
And that kind of experience instills the belief that one is evil, terribly evil. And later on, he used the German phrase, lebensunwürdige Leben, meaning living things that are unworthy to live. He classified large segments of the German nation as unworthy to live. And the idea, I believe, came from his own sense of himself.
When he was a boy, Adolf wanted to be a priest, and like Stalin, sang in the church choir. Hitler's father was the illegitimate son of an unmarried 42-year-old peasant woman who had become pregnant while working as a servant for a Jewish family. She never revealed who the father was. Hitler was obsessed with the thought that his paternal grandfather could have been Jewish.
What is important is what Hitler thought, and what he thought is established, that his grandfather was a Jew, so the offspring of a Jewish and Christian mating would always be a Jew. That was the basis for his belief that he was diseased, that nothing could remove this from him because it was in his blood.
In 1900, Hitler started primary school in the town of Linz. Like Stalin, the young Adolf was considered egotistical and domineering, demanding absolute subordination from other pupils. He was a poor student, however, much more interested in becoming an artist against his father's wishes. By 1905, he dropped out of school, hoping to pursue an artistic career. Like Hitler, Joseph also had an artistic side. As a teenager, he'd started writing poetry, at first romantic, then turning increasingly nihilistic and violent. The paranoia and narcissism that first surfaced during Joseph and Adolf's childhoods and teenage years was to become a driving force in both their lives.